It's basically common knowledge now. I love Final Fantasy. I love the games, I love the stories, I love the characters, I love the areas, I love the music. I love basically everything about these games. So I think it's just about time to show more of my passion for this series in the form of a countdown. And what better to do a countdown on than one of the most prominent parts of the franchise and one of the most generic list topics out there, boss fights. Now before any of you mention the obvious choice that many of you might be thinking of, let me quickly lay down some rules. For the sake of keeping this simpler, I'm only including boss fights from the main series games, so that means Chaos from Dissidia won't be on here. Also, I will not be implementing the 1 per game rule, so you will be seeing games represented more than once on this list, though I'll try my hardest not to go overkill in showing bias to one particular game. Anyways, now that we've gotten everything covered, let us commence! So what better way to start off a list of Final Fantasy bosses than with a boss from the game that started it all? While it hasn't aged all that well, the original Final Fantasy still has some standout traits among the series, such as being the one that introduced many of the famous elements in the franchise, like the job class system, and the difficulty. Especially the difficulty. Granted, this is to be expected from an NES game, but goodness, this game was hard! And if the main game wasn't hard enough, it also has a super boss, that being the War Mech. This boss can be found on the bridge leading to the Air Fiend Tiamat, and has power rivaling the game's final boss, so don't expect to plow through this battle when you encounter it. It usually gets a preemptive strike and also has the ability Nuclear, both of which can do quite a lot of damage to your party. It's also resistant to almost all elemental attacks and straight up immune to the Dia spell, as it's clearly not undead, and in the later remix of the game, the War Mech regenerates 5% of its health every single turn. Well, that sounds challenging, so why is it on the list? Quite simple, because it's a fun and challenging battle. It puts your skills to the test without relying on cheap tactics, something that super bosses aren't really known for. Not to mention, it's one of the more memorable parts of the original game, especially with its design. I mean, when you've got a medieval-like fantasy setting for your game, a giant battle robot really does tend to stand out. Or maybe that's just me. It's an overall great fight in a classic and challenging game. Not much else to say, so let's move on. Oh, Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh. If you ever wanted a formidable foe and a goofy comic relief character bundled into a single package, Gilgamesh would be that character. Making his debut in Final Fantasy V as a sort of rival character to your party, he's become a very popular character among the fanbase and has since had several incarnations throughout the series, usually bringing a great battle and his catchy boss theme along with him. But in my opinion, the game where Gilgamesh is at his absolute best battle-wise is in Final Fantasy XII. The first thing I should know about the Gilgamesh battle in this game is that this battle is the ultimate fan service card to Final Fantasy fans. I mean, the first battle against him takes place on a bridge with a pretty epic rendition of his boss theme playing, but for the sake of this list, we're talking about the second fight against him in the Lusu Mines. In this battle, Gilgamesh uses several iconic weapons from the other Final Fantasy games, including the Buster Sword, the Gunblade, Zidana's Ori Chaldong dagger, Tidus' Brotherhood Sword, and the summon-owned Zantetsuken. But outside of the fanservice overload, the battle itself is still pretty good. In this second clash, Gilgamesh has brought his companion Enkidu to help fight, and this tag team can prove to be a real challenge if you're not prepared. However, once Gilgamesh has lost 75% of his health, he'll bring out his trump card, the Worm Hero Blade, better known as the Dragon Quest fanservice card. At this point, Gilgamesh becomes far more lethal and can now use some devastating special attacks, which can be a real damage dealer. As many of you already know, I'm not the biggest fan of Final Fantasy XII's battle system, but even with that in mind, I still really enjoyed this battle. There's plenty of nods towards the older Final Fantasy games and even other Square Enix franchises. It's a really nice challenge, and did I forget to mention that Gilgamesh is voiced by John DiMaggio in this game?
How long I've waited! Gilgamesh fights again!
Goodness, that voice suits him so well. I honestly have no clue what I was thinking when I called the battle against the third Black Waltz my favorite normal boss in the Final Fantasy series. I mean, it's still a great battle and all, but it's not that good. But let's stop talking about past mistakes and look towards this epic battle from Final Fantasy IX. This enhanced Black Mage first encounters you shortly after Vivi discovers the Black Mage dolls, and it doesn't take long to get into battle with this beast once he kills all the dolls as they try to defend Vivi, leading to Vivi retaliating in a fit of rage. The instant the battle starts, Vivi's anger allows him to activate his trance mode, which gives him the ability to cast 2 spells per turn. Use this to your advantage! Black Waltz number 3 is a powerful magic user, but he doesn't counter any of Vivi's magic like Black Waltz number 2 did, so using as much of Vivi's magic and Steiner's sword magic as possible will really help in this fight, leaving Zidane all neglected and forced to play the role of support. Should've called one of the other lanes first, Zidane. Wait, wrong game. But having Zidane as your support might not be such a bad idea because 1. Stealing is a thing, and 2. He won't be able to do anything once Black Waltz number 3 takes to the skies. When airborne, no normal attacks will work on him, so you have to use magic on him if you want to get any damage done. It's an overall fun battle, and it's pretty satisfying to take the Black Waltz down, especially with the FMV that plays after this fight. Good to see PS1 FMVs improve by 2000. The less we get Tekken-like FMVs, the better. I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't the biggest fan of Final Fantasy II. I wasn't that fond of the stat growth system as a replacement of the standard level up system, some of the bosses got a little insane in the difficulty department, and I didn't really care for the story or characters, with one exception being the game's antagonist, Emperor Mateus. He was manipulative, he was threatening, he looked a bit like Jareth from Labyrinth, and he was just such an enjoyable villain whenever he appeared in-game. But most notably, he was persistent, as shown at the end of Final Fantasy II. Just when you thought the game's final boss was going to be your traitorous friend Leon, who took over Palamecia after Mateus was killed, Mateus comes rising up from the depths of hell, bringing an entire freaking castle with him. And it's then that you find out that after Mateus died, he went ahead and fought the devil, won, and became the ruler of hell. So yeah, that's quite the setup for your final boss, and boy does it pay off! The first thing I must mention about the Emperor of Hell is his design. I mean, that's a final boss if I've ever seen one. Sorry, I've just always loved this design. Now for the actual battle. Much like many of the final bosses in the series, the Emperor of Hell attacks quite relentlessly and can throw some powerful hits in. But in this boss's case, it becomes more of a challenge as he has the ability Drain, which means that every hit he lands will replenish his own HP. He also has quite the arsenal of both offensive and defensive magic attacks, including Flare 16 and a handful of status effects like Blind, Slow, and Curse. As you can guess, this boss is quite tough, but that's a good final boss for you, and it's just a downright fun battle. You've grown to either hate or love to hate this guy, so it makes it that much better to bring him down, especially when he's brought himself up to such a high level. And if that weren't enough, in the Game Boy Advance remake, this isn't even the final battle. There's a whole second story arc called Soul of Rebirth, where you discover that half of his soul has taken over heaven, and you get to fight him again! I think calling Mateus persistent was the understatement of the century. If Emperor Mateus is a persistent villain, then Seymour Guado from Final Fantasy X is the Lord of Persistency. Seriously, this guy just really doesn't want to die, does he? To those who don't know, in Final Fantasy X, when a character dies, they don't actually go to the afterlife until their soul is sent by a summoner. So no matter how many times the party kills Seymour, he'll just keep coming back again and again. Anyways, cut to near the end of the game, and Seymour has become one with Sin, the giant whale monster that's been terrorizing everyone for a majority of the game, and intends on using this new state to take control of Sin and wreak havoc on the world. But our heroes say otherwise.
Now nothing can stop us!
Well, we can.
So this brings us to the battle against Seymour Omnis, which is actually really fun. This fight incorporates an interesting system through the usage of the 4 discs behind Seymour. Each of the colors on the discs represent a different element of magic: fire, ice, lightning, and water. The power of his magic attacks vary depending on how close the corresponding colors are to him. For example, the more orange circles there are next to Seymour, the more powerful his fire spells will be. However, not only can Seymour rotate the discs, but you can actually rotate them too by hitting them, with the disc you hit turning counterclockwise if hit physically, which only walking could do due to the disc being out of range of melee attacks, or clockwise if hit magically. Alongside this unique mechanic, Seymour also has the ability to remove all status effects from your party members, whether they be positive or negative, and is also able to cast Ultima, the most powerful black magic spell in basically every main series game. This fight can be tricky, but the unique disc mechanic and the levels of satisfaction you get from bringing Seymour down are all worth it in the end, especially since Yuna finally sends him after this battle. Took them long enough. Sephiroth. One of the most popular villains in the Final Fantasy series, and a character that I admittedly was quite the fanboy of for a while. I mean, I still consider Sephiroth a good villain nowadays, but he's nowhere near as good as I made him out to be beforehand. That being said, there's still plenty of traits about Sephiroth I like, one of those being the final battle against him at the end of the game. The fight against Sephiroth consists of 3 phases, starting off with the fittingly named Bizarro Sephiroth. The first interesting thing about this phase is, surprisingly, the party setup. Depending on your party members' levels, how quickly you finish the previous battle against Genova Synthesis, and if you found the optional party members, you can either get 1 party, 2 parties, or 3 parties in this battle. Even his stats are altered depending on how many characters are fighting, In this fight, there are 5 targets that need to be destroyed: his head, his body, the green core, and his arms, both of which can cast powerful magic and need to be destroyed before you can get any damage done to the core. You can go ahead and try to destroy the head, but it will regenerate. So your main goals in this battle are the body and the core, but at the same time, when the head is destroyed, the body's attack amount decreases, so you've got to strategize carefully for this fight. Bazaar Sephiroth has plenty of abilities that will heal himself, so you need to try and balance out what parts of your party attacks, which will be easier if you have more parties. And keep in mind, this is only the first phase. In the second phase, Sephiroth transforms into his more powerful form, Safer Sephiroth. You only get access to one team this time around, but like Bizarro Sephiroth, Safer Sephiroth's stats will alter depending on your party members' levels and on the actions you did during the Genova Synthesis and Bizarro Sephiroth battles, with the highest possible HP amount reaching 400,000! Keep in mind, his default health is 80,000. Safer Sephiroth also has a set attack pattern, and if you memorize this pattern, you'll have the chance to prepare for a powerful attack or counteract it. This pattern includes casting a protection spell, flying up to a long range so he can't be hit by close range attacks, and the ever so classic and ever so longly cinematic Supernova. This fight really is a memorable one, not only for the actual battle, but also for Safer Sephiroth's design containing several biblical references, and his famous battle theme One Winged Angel. Though I personally prefer Birth of a God, the song that plays during the first phase. This brings us to the final phase, a one-on-one battle between Cloud and Sephiroth. The thing is, it's meant to be a finisher sequence with Cloud finally killing Sephiroth using Omni Slash, but the fact that anything can kill Sephiroth in this phase, including a counter caused by letting Sephiroth attack first, is underwhelming. Aside from this final phase, the rest of the fight is one of the best final battles the series has ever provided, though this does make me curious on how this battle will play out in the upcoming remake. Sephiroth may have had the title of most famous Final Fantasy villain for years, but as of recently, he's gotten some competition in the form of Final Fantasy VI's main antagonist, the crazy court mage Kefka Palazzo. The villains of the Final Fantasy series prior to Final Fantasy VI were more cold and ruthless villains, while Kefka seems more like the polar opposite. He's loud, maniacal, destructive, and extremely entertaining character. Seriously, Kefka is one of the most defining love-to-hate characters in gaming, because he may do some truly evil things like, bring the world to an apocalyptic state, but with what he says and does, you just can't help but love his antics. That being said, he still does make some good final boss material. But before you get to him, you have to deal with his barrier in the form of the Statue of the Gods. The Statue of the Gods consists of 3 tiers. In the first tier, you take on a demon-like creature which has 3 targets, those being the visage and the arms. In the second tier, you fight 4 strange creatures, all with appearances that somewhat matches Kefka's, and all 4 of them need to be destroyed before moving on. In the third tier, you have to destroy these 2 beings that bear a strange resemblance to Michelangelo's sculpture the Pieta. All 3 of these tiers can be tricky to take down, but fortunately, before the battle begins, the game lets you set the order of your party members so that if one is dead when the tier is finished, the next one in line will replace that party member for the next tier. It's a pretty cool concept if you ask me. But probably the most prominent part of the battle against the Statue of the Gods is the symbolism present throughout all 3 tiers, because there's actually quite a lot. In the official strategy guide made back when the game first came out, it was said that all 3 tiers represent the warring triad that Kefka left unbalanced in order to destroy the world and become a god in the first place. Another theory is that the phases represent the different traits of Kefka's personality, with the first tier representing his destructive nature, the second tier representing his insane personality, and the third tier representing his ascension into godhood. This theory is also supported by the song that plays during this battle, entitled Dancing Mad, which changes to match what the tiers representing. This was really creative on Square Enix's part. Let's not forget, there's still one more battle after you destroy the Statue of the Gods. As the third tier is destroyed, you ascend into what can be assumed is the heavens, and watch as the now divine Kefka Palazzo flies down to fight you. This song becomes far more ominous and intense as this fight begins, as if to symbolize that Kefka's finally done with you and is ready to wipe you from existence. This fight can be really difficult, especially since in his first turn, Kefka will cast Fallen One on you, which will bring your entire party's health to merely 1 HP. From then on, he'll unleash a barrage of magic attacks on you, including the easy-to-kill Havoc Wing and his ultimate attack, Forsaken. What's really interesting about this battle is the final part of it. As the song comes to an end, its intensity levels diminish greatly. It almost sounds like a song of defeat, as if Kefka's accepted the fact that he won't be winning this battle. He doesn't even do any cliché speech of defeat as he dies. That's pretty powerful. Kefka as a whole was a character with more than meets the eye, and this entire battle proves that. And not only that, but the fight itself is still really fun and challenging. But that being said, it's actually not my favorite final boss in the main series. Throughout a majority of Final Fantasy IV's story, your party has been antagonized by the very ambiguous villain Golbez, a dark-armored warlock who took over the Red Wings after Cecil was revoked of his role as captain by the King of Baron. Golbez does some pretty evil stuff throughout the game, but as you reach the end of it, the truth starts to come out. As it turns out, Golbez is Cecil's older brother, and has been subjected to mind control by the game's actual main villain, the Lunarian sorcerer Zemus. Jump to the end of the game, and your party reaches Zemus, who's already in the midst of fighting Golbez and another Lunarian by the name of Fusoya, who had helped break Zemus' control over Golbez earlier in the game. You get taken into battle, but the fight is entirely cinematic, and you watch as Golbez and Fusoya take on Zemus until they finally cast Double Meteor, defeating Zemus. However, the battle's only just begun. After Zemus falls, his very hatred takes a physical form under the name of Zeromus. Golbez and Fusoya try to bring Zeromus down, but to no avail. Golbez even tries to use the Crystal of the Moon that could supposedly make Zeromus vulnerable, but Golbez's heart is too corrupted for it to work. It's at this point that all feels hopeless, until the prayers of those in Mysidia revive our heroes, and Golbez gives Cecil the crystal to use against Zeromus. At this point, you're thrown into battle. Zeromus cannot attack, but can also not be damaged. The only way you can beat him is by having Cecil use the crystal. This seems odd, Maverick. This fight consisted of a scripted battle and then a one-hit kill. How on earth is this your favorite final boss in the main series? Who said that was the entire battle? The crystal doesn't actually kill Zeromus, it makes him vulnerable, forcing him to transform into his true form, which is where the battle really begins. As to be expected with the final boss in this series, Zeromus is quite the challenge to fight. He's got some quite powerful magic attacks, most notably Black Hole and his signature move, Big Bang, which can do a large amount of damage to all your party members and also inflict sap on your party, with sap being a faster life-draining status effect along the lines of poison. Alongside that, in the DS remake of Final Fantasy IV, which is known for its difficulty, Zeromus can counterattack all of Rydia's summons with the MP-absorbing Osmos, and can also counterattack both any black magic and holy with a flare spell. Again, this fight can be really difficult, especially in the already really challenging DS version, but at the same time, it's a fun challenge and overall great way to end off Final Fantasy IV. It stands as my favorite final boss in the main series games, and my second favorite final boss in the series as a whole, my favorite being pretty obvious. But despite this, Zeromus isn't actually my favorite boss in Final Fantasy IV. That would go to this boss. If you ever want a fair boss fight, look no further than the Autarch of Flame, Rubicante. I mean, you could tell just from this cutscene that plays before this battle this will be a fair boss fight.
I respect men like you. Men with courage.
Heck, he even goes ahead and fully heals your party before the battle begins. How awesome is that? But if that wasn't good enough, then the actual battle begins. The interesting gimmick of this battle resides in that cloak that Rubicante wears. Whenever he holds it in front of him, all magic spells cast on him other than fire spells will actually heal him rather than do damage. Fortunately, when he has his cloak in front of him, he can only use a physical attack and Fire. However, when he's not hiding behind his cloak, he can cast some powerful fire spells, including his signature attack Inferno, which is a potential instant kill to whomever he casts the spell on. But that's okay. All you need to do is cast a fire spell on him when his cloak's up, and he'll cast a revive spell on all your dead party members. Wait, what? I mean, I'm not complaining, it's a nice gesture, Rubicante, but not exactly sure why you're doing this. In all seriousness though, I love this battle. The character is great, the challenge level is great, and the game gives some fair room for failure. It's an overall fantastic boss fight and an overall fantastic game. But alas, there is still one more battle on this list. If you were to ask me who my favorite villain in the Final Fantasy series currently is, you'd be surprised that I wouldn't actually say Sephiroth, or Kefka for that matter. My favorite villain in the franchise is actually the main antagonist of Final Fantasy IX, Kuja. While he is rather narcissistic, his arrogance never gets to an annoying state, since he has power to match all the boasting he does. He's also a very theatrical character, always speaking as if he were performing in a Shakespearean play. But most interestingly though, Kuja's actually quite a three-dimensional villain. He's insecure about his own existence since he was actually created as a mere tool for Garland, one of the other main antagonists of the game. This is taken especially into account when he realizes that the purpose behind his creation is irrelevant when Zidane comes into the picture. This leads us to the end of the game, where Kuja's become so furious by his existence as only a temporary pawn that he's become insanely obsessed with ending the world, declaring that he won't let the world exist without him. And thus, Zidane and his friends encounter Kuja in the Crystal World, ready to destroy the crystal that holds the key to all life. He initially sends the dragon Death Guys to get rid of the party for him, but when that doesn't work, Kuja decides to take matters into his own hands. Oh goodness, there's so much I love about this battle against Kuja, now in his all-powerful transform. The first thing I must mention is his battle theme, entitled The Darkness of Eternity, or alternately, The Dark Messenger. It's one of my personal favorite boss themes in the entire franchise, a magnificently composed piece of music complete with organs and a guitar riff. It's no wonder Nobuo Uematsu calls Final Fantasy IX his favorite of all of his musical work. But now let's talk about the actual fight. Being the game's penultimate boss, Trance Kuja is no pushover. I mean, he starts the battle off with Flare Star, an attack that not only does damage to all party members and ignores Reflect, but it does more damage the higher your party members' levels are. He also has access to other powerful magic spells like Flare and Holy, and even some defensive spells like Kiraga and Reflect. It can be quite the challenge, especially since Trance Kuja will use Flare Star more frequently as he loses health. But this battle is a fun test of your skills. But probably the most interesting thing about this battle is the fact that you don't actually win. Yeah, when Kuja's health reaches 0, he uses the Ultima spell, which straight up kills your party. Yeah, I'm not even joking. It's not really a forced loss battle since you still have to beat him before the sequence occurs, but it's still fascinating that you never actually beat Kuja through the entire game. Not every day you see that in an RPG. As you could tell, there's a lot of love about this battle. It's a great challenge that puts all your skills to the test, the character himself is extremely memorable, the music is amazing, and it's an overall fantastic boss fight. And is easily my favorite boss battle in the main series Final Fantasy games. I'm the One-Winged Angel, and it's pretty disappointing that Trance Kuja isn't the final boss. I mean, he would have made much better final boss material than freaking Necro. Nope, I'll save that rant for next time. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed this countdown. I've been wanting to do this list for a while now, but I was waiting until I finished Final Fantasy IX, and as you can tell, I'm glad I waited. So yeah, I'll try to have top 10 worst Final Fantasy bosses done soon enough, so you can look forward to that. In the meantime, if you liked what you saw, feel free to click those like and subscribe buttons. And if you'd like to watch other countdowns made by me, click on the annotation on screen. It'll take you to a playlist with my other worthwhile countdowns. Or if you want to see what crazy antics I'm up to and occasionally an update on my work, feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'm the One-Winged Angel, and thank you for watching.
Fools, you face the mightiest swordsman in all Ybalice. You face me.
Garugamesh!
Oh yeah!